Get ready to be drained mentally and physically in the spirit of the vampire in this tie-in issue. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to be reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man number 49. Spoiler warning, we're going to be talking about the comic book itself, so if you haven't read it, definitely read it and then come back to this video. But without further ado, let's jump right into this comic. This vampire story is actually a tie-in issue, part 1, of the happenings of this overall comic story that's happening in another comic run. So right off the bat, it probably doesn't really impact the overall story of The Amazing Spider-Man. This is definitely just part 1 to intrigue you into this vampire story that they're doing. Personally, myself, as of reviewing this comic, I have read The Blood Hunt, issue number 1, and have also caught up with the free comic book day that also tells the story from Spider-Man's perspective, which definitely anyone that's interested isn't missing too much. The guy just teases the villain that he's fighting, and then all of a sudden the sky just goes dark and the villain is the actual sky somehow. It's happening everywhere. And this issue is meant to establish what Spider-Man is doing to combat this issue. Personally, for myself, I wasn't interested in the slightest in pursuing this any further from the Spider-Man perspective. It doesn't do a very good job at trying to hook me into that story from the Spider-Man side, so I really don't care. I'm not going to be reviewing the Spider-Man vampire tie-ins. This issue begins with Kareem and White Rabbit, who are tasked to go shake up this bodega to try to get some income. So Kareem is waiting outside and White Rabbit is inside trying to do the shaking up. In the process, the gentleman that they were shaking up turned out to be a vampire, so he ended up biting White Rabbit, inevitably turning her into a vampire. Everyone in the city is turning into vampires, and Spider-Man's just trying his best to just beat down vampires around him, preventing other people from turning into vampires. And you could imagine how successful he would be. Not very well. The story does establish that MJ's taking care of Aunt Anna and Randy, so they're good somehow, I suppose. He's not gonna rendezvous with them and somehow prevent them from getting turned into vampires. Nah, Spider-Man's got a whole side quest to go through. Spider-Man gets a message from this random unknown number saying that he needs help at this specific address. So Spider-Man heads over to help out this mystery person, and it turns out to be Kareem. Kareem somehow manages to convince Spider-Man in helping him out in the situation of White Rabbit getting turned into a vampire. And their plan is to go inside and just stake him at the heart with a wooden stake. But Spider-Man is definitely reluctant to do so because this just turns them into dust, and of course they were people before, so he's very conflicted. Upon encountering White Rabbit herself, they get into a conflict. Spider-Man definitely hesitates to take out White Rabbit, and Kareem shows up to save him, knocks her into like a shopping cart, and throws her into a storage unit, closing the door and locking it. Now, if this sounds immensely cartoonish, it definitely is. Now all that's left is to confront the vampire that turned White Rabbit into a vampire. And it's the gentleman that owned the bodega that they were gonna go shake down for income. The gentleman that owns the store that's now a vampire goes on a very long rant, somehow making this Spider-Man's fault, buying enough time for Kareem to show up and just stake the guy in the back, causing him to turn into dust. Spider-Man is surprised that Kareem showed up and did what he did, even though they clearly talked about using those stakes. Spider-Man even went in there with him. The guy didn't even consider to convince Kareem to at least not use them. White Rabbit then just walks up, like, wasn't she just locked behind this storage unit? How is she just walking up in this scenario just out of nowhere? She doesn't try to attack anyone, she just steps up and she's like, oh, what happened? Like, the fuck? What kind of storytelling is this? Spider-Man then just leaves them and continues doing what he was doing at the very beginning of the issue, which was just fighting random vampires. When out of the blue, the Lizard comes out of nowhere. And we're left on a to be continued, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, this continues in the Amazing Spider-Man vampire story that they got going on. I can safely say we definitely aren't missing too much by not reading this particular issue. I was genuinely expecting after the previous issues that we were at least gonna get a pretty cool, interaction with some vampires. Definitely Spider-Man being conflicted over taking them on somehow. But the moment the story started off with Kareem and White Rabbit, I was like, no. Right off the bat, this story's goofy, nothing's gonna be taken seriously. And then somehow Spider-Man ends up being the villain in this case. I don't know, man. Anyways, that is all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed this video at any point, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.